Wow, it's been so easy using Anchor for my podcast needs. I can edit it very easily on my cell phone. I can also use it on my computer, which is great. I can upload new pictures for each podcast if I need to. And the thing that I really appreciate it as a fledgling podcaster is that it's free. So I highly recommend it.
Hello and welcome to EQ Above IQ, Parenting with Emotional Intelligence and Healing the Inner Child. My name is Trina Casey and I'm your host. Thank you so much for joining me today and all the previous days. I'm so excited to see my listenership increase over the last few months, and thank you. You have really helped me and encouraged me to live in my purpose, and so I shall continue. And I'm calling out to people. I am in the process of trying to raise some funds for sponsorship, and so if you are interested in sponsoring, I'm going to have a link on my website fairly shortly. This just came to my mind a while ago because I really love what I'm doing. So it's kind of hard for me to ask for funding. But the reason why I am is because I want to dedicate more time to it. And so, yeah, that's where I'm at with it. Also, please go and sign up for some coaching. That really helps me out as well because I want to help people. That's my purpose. I want to do what I am put on this earth to do, and which gives me gratitude, which gives me peace, and I know will help the world. Learning emotional intelligence is going to help the world, people. I have zero doubts about that. And so once everybody learns these principles and put them in practice, wow, it's going to be a phenomenal, beautiful, I can't think of any other words other than just blessed day. So go ahead and check that out. And if you can't support through coaching or you're just a fan and you're doing the EQ thing already with your kids, go check out some books to support there. And I also have a really cool clothing line that's called Gentle Reminders. And all of that is on thisreallifebooks.com with various tabs. So go ahead and click through. And if you'd like to have a conversation, please click on the conversation. We can have a quick chat as well. I always like hearing from people. Anyways, jumping into this episode today, I'm going to be talking about something that kind of goes along with the principle of self-regulation, which is something that as parents, we need to do as the grown-up and with our children. But there's something else that I feel is really important that needs to be touched on, and that's called co-regulation. Co-regulation is almost like self-regulation in that you are being aware of how your body is feeling, how you are being heard, interpreted by other people. But co-regulation is really helpful because as it infers, it takes two. It's two people in the regulation process. And as we raise our kids, we are in this co-regulation phase more often than we are aware of. So what is co-regulation? I'm going to explain to you. Co-regulation is the warm and responsive interactions that we provide, that provide the support and the coaching and the modeling that our children need to really understand and express and modulate their thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. You know, it's the teachers are probably well aware of this, or they should be well aware of this. I've not had the best experience with my son's teachers with co-regulation. Matter of fact, I've had pretty disastrous, and it's kind of been like, I've been aghast on how unable teachers are to self-regulate and co-regulate with their students, but everybody has a different experience. And I think even as adults, we can go back to that teacher who just could not keep their crap together. They just yelled and were abrasive, and in turn made us feel pretty bad about ourselves, and definitely did not teach us any tools on how to modulate our behaviors. I listened to a really good book many times. Actually, I revisit it because it's always a good reminder to go out and re-familiarize yourself with the things that you learn, because there's always things changing. The name of the book is How to Talk So Kids Will Listen, and Listen So Kids Will Talk. Yeah. And it's a book. It's quite old, actually. It's by Adele Faber and Elaine Maslish. And it's a good basic book. I've read it, and then it became available in audio, and I listened to it. And there's a version of this for teachers as well that is really short. I actually sent it to a few of my son's teachers in a loving and compassionate way, because I could see that they were kind of struggling on how to communicate and get the best out of my son. So it's hard to explain to your teachers when your child's teachers, when you are using an EQ method of educating your child, raising your child, because that's just not the norm. I struggle with this not only just with teachers, but even within family structures. There are a lot of old ways of raising children that, are reinforced in the culture to this very day. Some people will say to you, well, I was raised this way or that way. I was spanked. I was punished. And I turned out all right. Well, no, you didn't. You want to be honest with yourself, be honest with the way that the world is. The way that the world is right now, and when I reflect on it, nobody is all right. Matter of fact, we're all in this struggle to empower ourselves. But unfortunately, that structure is still around disempowering somebody else. And that's because that is the structure in which we were raised. You had zero autonomy. You imagine. No, you don't even have to imagine. Remember, you wanted to do something, or you wanted to have something, and you were told you couldn't have it. And sometimes that you were told in a way that was really violent or disrespectful, or, just really demeaning to your person. And then that's what you remember, and that's what you grow up with. And this is how you feel about yourself. The whole point of emotional intelligence is, in parenting in particular, is to help empower your children with healthy boundaries in a way that doesn't make them feel less than as a person. To empower them and teach them how to be adults. And it's really difficult when you have a world pushing up against that. What I'm talking about is not new. It's just finally taken off in a way, because we can really see how the old ways of parenting have really created the world that we live in now, which is full of strife, which is full of hierarchy, which is full of, things that we didn't really take into account. But if you think about the history of the world, think of feudal Europe and how there were only three major structures. There were the monarchy, there was the clergy, and there was the peasants. So, the peasants were, basically at the disposal of the other two. And that turned to violence, and that turned to self-loathing, and that turned to a long, 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 long history of trauma that just kept spreading out in the world. And, when I talked about it in the first episode of season 1, the globalization of trauma. So if you haven't heard that, go back and listen. I talk about this a little bit more in detail. But the point is this: until we get underneath the root of these structures and really understand where they come from, we can't do things differently. Until we model the behavior that we want from our children, then we can't expect anything differently. Remember, our kids are biological beings, as we were. Those temper tantrums you had weren't abnormal. They weren't necessarily manipulation. And I think that because the structures are set up in the way that there has been so much manipulation of our person, telling us who we can and we can't be, and especially being a woman of color. And there's just always been this box that people tried to place me in, because that is the box that was created for us. And I have done everything in my will. I have rebelled. I used to always joke and say I'm the white sheep of the family, because, black sheep is the opposite. You know what I mean? And the reason why I say that is because I made a choice very young, unbeknownst to anyone else in my house, that I would not live the same life that I was being forced to live. I was going to use the will I had, the power of manifestation that all children have, to create the life that I want. And I've been actually pretty successful at that with when I reflect. I've lived all over the world. It took me a while to take that leap, because it took me a while to get to the place of healing my own inner child, to be brave enough to do it. So imagine if we raised our children and instilled within them that confidence from the beginning, that self-love, that compassion for themselves, that they feel they can do anything in the world that they want to. I mean, I'm not talking about negative things also, because that's where the compassionate part comes in. But that idea that our children are manipulating us to get what they want, it's not just that. It's about a biological system working inside of us to survive. We are on survival mode. We are either in fight, flight, or freeze mode. And all of that is intensified as we model our behavior for them. It's either everything is, you can do what you want in your life, you can do good things, or it's you are not enough. And so that is something that, even though the rest of the world is perpetuating this idea of not being enough, and that to be enough, you must have this or that, or live this way or that way, it's a core feeling of self-love that we need to be cultivating in our children, so that they can make those choices of what they want to do with their lives. If they want to, have a sports car, be rich, or whatever, but it's not based on a feeling of not having enough or a feeling of scarcity. It has to be on a feeling of, I kind of just want that right now. It's not about measuring or comparing themselves to another person. But think about it. That is what is the foundation of the world. So when you're raising your children in an EQ way, you're going to always have all these mixed feelings, because you have the outside world telling you what you're doing is wrong. What you're doing is wrong. But the truth is that there is a demographic of people who feel that way. And they happen to just be the ruling class of the world. See, they don't have the feelings of limitations that have been perpetuated on, dare I say, the peasants. And so let's shift that mindset about scarcity and switch into a feeling of abundance, a feeling of empowerment for our children. And we disempower our children when we criticize them for being children, when we criticize ourselves, really, too. If we're not reflecting self-love and compassion for ourselves on a daily basis and modeling that to them, then guess what? they're not going to do it, or they're not going to value it. I mean, there's always opportunities for shifts, generational shifts. I think that all parents, when they start to get into this state of awakening, I would say, if you're listening to this podcast, it's because you are now in a state of awakening. You know how you were raised wasn't right. Or you know that, you may know that your parents loved you and all this stuff, but you feel like it could have been better. And guess what? You are doing better right now. I think generation after generation, depending on your demographic and where you come from, we have incrementally done better. So I don't want it to seem like the world is all doom and gloom. Yes, it's a lot better than it was, thousands of years ago, when there were no plumbing and there was no real rules as far as murdering and all these negative things. It's a lot better in longevity of life. So it's not all doom and gloom. It's the awareness that it can always get better. It's the awareness of abundance. It's the awareness that we need to teach our kids to be in the most optimal situation for the future, not the detrimental. Like, we really need to, as parents, to remember what we are teaching our children is what they will pass on to the rest of the world and be. I think on my last interview with Patrice Washington, if you haven't listened to that interview, you must listen to that interview. It was so great. We talked about what our motivations were to have children. And she said something that I said in season 1, to have a productive citizen. And I think that, or to raise a productive citizen, I should say. And I think that is really, really important. I think as we live together in a society, in a culture where we all should be kind of cultivating ways to find our purpose, to contribute in a positive way. And so, I'm really grateful for this podcast and this journey that I am on at this point of my life, because I have this beautiful son who's about to turn 10 years old, and he's so proud of me. Wow. That makes my heart so full. So if anything, if I don't become the best-selling artist of children's books that teach emotional intelligence or anything that is noteworthy other than what I'm doing now, I have completed my purpose. And that is, I've contributed to the most important person into my life a sense of understanding what it feels like to be in purpose, to look at another person that they love and care about and go, that's my mommy, or that's my friend. And I feel good feelings towards them daily. Their purpose is making a difference in my life and hopefully the lives of other people in my generation. So, my son knows what the words emotional intelligence means. I didn't know. That wasn't a thing when I was a kid. And I definitely didn't grow up in a household where it was a part of the dialogue. I didn't grow up in a house where I had a voice. And this was something that was very interesting. I was listening in on a YouTube live regarding different facets of parenting with emotional intelligence. And I think it was geared towards parents who weren't doing it, but I found that it was mostly professionals working in the field. So it was really interesting. And I posed the question, my biggest challenge for my community, the African American community, is that emotional intelligence is seen as weakness. And that's because there's been this box we've been put in where we're constantly perpetuated that, you have to be strong, you have to be strong, you have to be strong. You can't have feelings. Feelings are a form of weakness. And really what I have seen is that has perpetuated a deep mental health crisis that finally is being talked about by us, with us, for us. There is a shame being lifted for having had experienced really oppressive and traumatic things based in our enslavement as a culture. These are things that no group has endured in the way that we have. And there's also a big conversation about how the Asian American community had similar situations, oppression. And one of the things I want to talk about, because I have commented on a few different Instagram feeds regarding this, one of the things that I always bring up is that until we, as individual cultures, get right with our own biases against each other as a culture and understand where they come from, then this divide that the African American culture and the Asian communities have with each other will continue. And there's been a lot of discussion about, I've experienced just as much racism with Asian community than as I have with white, and the Asian community, I've experienced violence and bigotry from the Black community. We have to stop this. We have to come to a place of accountability for our own behaviors towards each other and just stop it, because what has happened is that the system that has constantly divided us is continuing that process. So we need to be unified. And I would say that with all cultures, we have to stop systemic racism for all people of color. And the only way that we can do that is not highlighting necessarily who has it worse, but to acknowledge and take accountability about our participation in it. And if we have participated in that, then understand where that came from. There is a term, divide and conquer. So we need to stop dividing, and we need to create unity, and we need to make all of our conversations about racism, oppression, violence against people of color together. It doesn't need to be just the Asian community. It doesn't need to be just the Black community. It doesn't need to be just the Latino. It has to be under an umbrella of unity, or it will continue. And that's actually a discussion that I actually had with my son, because he was asking about it. Somebody else had brought up, well, this is Black History Month. Why is this all of a sudden on the table? This is our month. And there is no ownership of oppression. Oppression is oppression. We can argue about timing. We can argue about all kinds of things. But the truth is that this suffering has been on for centuries and centuries. So everybody who has been under that umbrella of people of color, we need to unite. So anyways, that was a side note. Anyways, in order for us to raise healthy and mentally healthy kids, we're going to have to really come to terms with the history of this world and why it came to be and how we're going to change it and how our Caucasian brothers and sisters are going to help and participate with that. So let's empower our children by no longer framing them as burdens, less than, devoid of respect, or not deserving of respect. We must learn to co-regulate with our kids. When they are in that moment, we have to self-regulate ourselves because we're the grown-ups. But if you don't know how to do that yet, I can help with that. Self-regulation is a tool that has to be practiced. It's a tool that if you've never seen that modeled for you, you're going to have a hard time doing on your own. So reach out to coaches like me. I can give you tools. I can walk you through it. I can be the ear when you need that support of like, okay, I'm about to lose it. We can get underneath why you are having the responses that you are having. Why are you going straight to anger? Why are you going straight to fear? Why are you going to anxiety? That is what I do as a cognitive behavioral therapy coach, as an EQ parenting coach. I put that together in order to help you learn how to reparent your own inner child. Because believe it or not, all of those responses that you are having to your own children, when you don't have the ability to co-regulate or self-regulate, is because of your own inner child trauma. Your own inner child trauma. So you're going to just repeat the things that you learned as a child until you bring an awareness to them. So let's bring the awareness. Let's do something different. Let's find the tools. Let's work together as individuals. Let's take the personal responsibility and accountability to make the shifts that we need to do. And we can raise happier, healthier, and more compassionate kids for the future. More loving, self-loving children for the future, because self-love is so vital. If you can't love yourself, how are you going to love anybody else? I think RuPaul said that. And speaking of RuPaul, I absolutely applaud and adore the LGBTQ community because they have figured this piece out. And if you're critical of this community, I'm sorry, but I got to point something out to you. It takes a huge amount of self-love and bravery to be trans, to be gay, to be lesbian, to be queer, to own the person that you are inside of you. It takes so much self-love. And it's part of the reason why I wrote the book, I Love Pink, A Trans Tales. I am and have always been inspired by this community because they live their life the way that they want to. They love themselves. And that's something all cisgendered people can learn from. So if you don't know about I Love Pink, Trans Tale, go check that book out on my website. Get it for your kids. It's not just a story about a trans girl. It's about a friendship as well that develops through the experience of being trans in a school environment. So go get that book. Check it out. I've been very blessed. I appreciate the sales of this book, but there's a reason. And behind every single one of my books, there are questions. If you're unsure on how to approach the conversation with your child, if you have some fear around, you think it's going to change your child's gender or anything, or, don't worry. People are who they are. They are born this way, and there's not anything that can change that. What I have found is that we have a lot of people who come out much, much later in their lives because they finally have learned that they are feeling the way that they have been feeling all of their lives. So they became self-aware. That's the power of self-awareness, people. So anyways, I am so grateful that you have listened in for as long as you have. I appreciate you. I appreciate your listenership because it means that I'm adding value, and that is my purpose. I want to add value. I want to add encouragement on this parenting journey. And it also is a beautiful healing process for me. So thank you for allowing me to heal through your healing. And I hope you have a blessed day.